and final passage of Senate Bill 1008A. Representative Williamson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Colleagues, as we've heard, 25 years ago, the voters of Oregon passed Measure 11, setting mandatory minimum sentences for a range of crimes. Those sentences range from 5 years and 10 months to 30 years to life. Included in this measure was the requirement that children 15 and older charged with the listed felonies be tried as adults. In the 25 years since the measure passed, we've learned a lot about brain development, science and chemistry, how children develop, and why the system is not working as it's intended. For instance, we know that children's brains are not fully developed until they're in their mid-20s. And science has noted the ability for significant change and growth during those developmental years. Nationally, the statistics show that kids prosecuted in adult court and released from state prisons were rearrested 82% of the time, while adults in the same situation were rearrested 16% less. We know that for communities of color, Measure 11 indictments are significantly higher. Black children account for 15.5% of Measure 11 indictments, but only 1.8% of the general population in Oregon. This means that Black children are 8 times as likely to be indicted under our current law than their numbers represent in our state. Let me say that again. Black children are overrepresented by more than 8 times in Measure 11 indictments. And these are for the same crimes that their white colleagues may have committed. 8 times. Colleagues, what we're doing right now is not working. Our system is creating a class of people who reoffend at higher rates. It's disproportionately targeting communities of color, and it is failing to do what we want our system to do, to rehabilitate those who go through it so they can have a chance to be the good neighbors we all want. Children are not miniature adults, and we should not treat them like they are. Currently in our state, when a child is charged with a crime, they are generally tried in juvenile court and if found guilty, sentenced to the custody of the Oregon Youth Authority, an agency created specifically to hold youth accountable for their actions while aiding in their reformation. However, when a child is charged with a Measure 11 crime, they are automatically tried in adult court and given an adult sentence, regardless of the extenuating circumstances of the case or the discretion of a judge or opinion of experts. Under this system, a child is charged with a Measure 11 crime, is still put into the adult court and subject to adult sentences, even if the crime they are eventually convicted of or pleaded to is not a Measure 11 crime. So let me repeat that. It's at the time that they are charged that they go into the adult system, not when they're convicted or plead guilty to a non-Measure 11 crime. I just don't think that makes sense. But being put through the adult court comes with additional consequences. Child receives an adult conviction on their record, which makes it more difficult to get work or housing after the release than a juvenile conviction would. They're not eligible for a second look hearing, regardless of how well they do in custody. And they're required to be transferred to an adult prison on their 25th birthday, no matter how short of time they have left on their sentence. Under this system, we also know we have a serious constitutional problem. If someone is convicted of aggravated murder, they're required to be sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The United States Supreme Court has ruled in the Miller case that that is unconstitutional. It is unconstitutional to automatically sentence a child to life without parole. And just a few weeks ago, the Oregon Court of Appeals ruled that Oregon's current sentencing scheme is unconstitutional under that decision. So let's be clear, we have to fix this, colleagues. We have to make our system constitutional. Making things fair, making things equitable, standing up for kids, protecting our constitutional rights, these are the reasons I'm here. These are the kind of things that get me up in the morning. And they're the reasons that many of us ran for public office. I believe those values are central to this bill. Senate Bill 1008 gives us an opportunity to fix what we know to be a significant problem while still ensuring that our worst offenders, those individuals who have committed heinous crimes, can be appropriately sentenced and can be sentenced in adult court. As you have heard several times now, this bill comes after years of a bipartisan bicameral work group of legislators and stakeholders from across the juvenile justice community, and as I mentioned earlier, including our district attorneys. I want to say that again because it's not something that we hear much about these days, that this youth justice reform bill is a bipartisan bill with bipartisan champions and I believe truly strong bipartisan support. Senate Bill 1008 eliminates the automatic waiver of kids into adult court and requires a judge to make a determination whether a child should be tried and sentenced as a juvenile or adult. It extends eligibility for second look hearings to all juvenile cases. These are the hearings that occur halfway through a juvenile sentence and allow a judge to decide whether or not a supervised release of the child would be is appropriate because they've been significantly rehabilitated, they don't pose a danger to the community, and that the outcomes for that youth would be better served if they were released and supervised. This bill would allow for transfer hearings for children who are at the youth authority and age out, as I said, go to adult prison on their 25th birthday. If they have less than 2 years remaining on their sentence, a judge can order supervised release for the remainder of their sentence if it's appropriate. It would fix our constitutional problem by eliminating automatic life without the possibility of parole for children and make them eligible for a parole hearing after serving 15 years of their sentence. And despite what you've heard and actually what I've said, this legislation is important. It is not earth-shattering. It's not going to let the worst offenders out of our state prisons. It's not going to open up Measure 11 to a simple majority vote. And it's not going to prevent youth who have committed heinous crimes from being charged as adults. This is about giving judges discretion, the discretion they're elected to exercise, and allows them to charge appropriately in a case. We have the opportunity not only to ensure our system is constitutional, but to make it more fair so that the kids who go through the system are rehabilitated and become productive members of our society. Senate Bill 1008, this juvenile justice reform bill, is about simple values that I believe matter to all Oregonians, making things fair, making things equitable, and about protecting our constitutional rights. And I think it's also about standing up for kids and standing by them, and no longer warehousing them or writing them off. I urge an aye vote.